All right, guys, so back into Vex VR, we're going to be taking a look at your assignment. And really, all this entails is just going to be getting your robot to drive through the letters. So A, B, C, D. Okay. Now, we're going to actually work through the first portion together. And there's a few things that we're going to have to focus on. First, we want this to basically be completely built on using our sensors. So we want our sensors to drive our robot from each letter to each letter. Okay. So rather than telling it what to do, like turn left, turn right, drive forward, drive reverse, whatever you're doing, we're not actually doing that. We're not the ones in charge. We're giving the robot the reins. We're creating an fully autonomous robot. All right. Oh, almost fully autonomous, because when we get into the turning portion, we are telling it to turn a specific direction. But when it comes to maneuvering the rest of the way through the maze, it is relying completely on the sensors that it has. So that's what we're going to be doing. That we're going to be designing this robot to function almost completely by itself. And the way that we're going to start this, just like we always do, on the left-hand side, we are going to find our drive velocity and our turn velocity, those two. And we want it to move a little bit faster, right? We don't want our robot to move very slow. In some cases, you might want your robot to move slow, but for this assignment, let's speed it up a little bit so it's a little bit quicker to test as well. And it'll save you time at home. All right. The next thing that we need to do, since our robot currently is facing forward, all right, we can see that here. It is facing forward. We need to make sure that we set our drive, or set our heading, our drive heading, to 0 degrees. All right, so right now it's facing 0 degrees. That's the direction it's facing. Remember, like north, south, east, west. Right now it's facing 0 degrees. So once it does that, then we're going to drive to letter A. Okay, so again, if we look at the map from above, we can see our first thing that we want to go towards here is letter A. We want to get our robot there. And we are strictly focusing on using two sensors, our bumper sensor and our distance sensor. Those are the two main ones that you're actually going to be doing or using. So just for the bumper sensor, we'll say, see, what are we going to say here? Bumper sensors to letter A, right? So I just put in a comment. This is typically a good way to break up your code, so that way it's not 100 lines long and you don't know where certain things are. So start to add in some comments to kind of break it up. So right now we're just going to focus on getting our robot to letter A using our bumper sensors. So once we do that, we know if we look at our robot, we need it to drive forward. Okay, nice and simple, a drive forward block. All right, remember, we are not using these. All right, we're not using the drive forward for a specific amount. Do not use that. You will not earn credit. We want this to be completely autonomous. So by doing this, we're basically saying, hey, drive forward for however long you need to. And it's up to the robot. However long you need to drive forward, drive forward. So we're going to drive forward, but we're only driving forward until, and that's the important thing, right? So we are going to drive forward until, we're going to use a wait until block. So drive forward until something. Okay. And that's where, since we're using bumper sensors, we're going to go down to the bumper sensing section. All right. We only have one option. Bumper sensor is pressed or not pressed, right? So it doesn't matter which one we set it to. We can have it to left bumper or right bumper. All right. I'll keep it as left bumper. It doesn't matter. So we want it to drive forward until that bumper is pressed. So when that bumper is pressed, then what do we want it to do, right? It's hit a wall. Now we're telling it, okay, what do you want me to do? Right? The robot's going, okay, what do you want me to do? So we are going to tell it to turn. Okay, you ran into a wall. We want you to turn. You have to turn. You can't go forward again because you're just going to run into the wall again. So now it's time. We want you to turn. And since we have set our drive heading, every turn that you're going to make is going to be this block here. Only one block. Turn to heading. Okay. We know that we want our robot, once it drives forward and runs into this wall, we need it to turn left. Okay. So we're going to help out a little bit and say, okay, so since forward is 0 degrees, when we turn left, all right, when we turn left, left is going to be 270 degrees. We want you to turn to 270 degrees. So that's what it's going to do. All right, it's going to turn to the heading 270 degrees, which should be 90 degrees left. Then from that point, right, we want to tell it, now you can continue on your way. All right, we're going to drive forward, just like we did before. So in this case, just like we did earlier, right, this portion right here, what I can do is, here's a little tip. Sometimes what you can do is you can actually take a block. I'm going to place it down here, and I'm going to get my left bumper, right? So I have an extra block down here. Anytime I need it, because I know I'm going to be repeating this all the time because I'm using my bumper sensor all the time. So rather than building this every time and finding those blocks, I can just make one down here. And if I right click on it, I can duplicate the block, right? So I can copy it. Nice and easy. So I click duplicate. Now I have one. All right. This other one down here doesn't disappear, right? Because I just duplicated. I just made a copy. So I can constantly use that one. And that makes it easier. So back to it, right? We have him drive forward. He runs into the wall. The sensor detects that it ran into a wall. So then you tell it to do something. Okay, you ran into the wall, turn left, right? We turn to 270 degrees, then drive forward until you run into another wall, right? So it's going to drive up, drive forward until it runs into another wall. Then we want it to turn again, right? But this time, we want it to turn left, but we don't want it to turn to 270 because it's already facing 270. All right, so turn to heading. This can be another one I can add down here. All right, I'll try not to connect them. So I need to turn to heading. And in this case, I want it to face down. All right, so I'm going to change this to opposite of 0, which is 180. Right? So it needs to turn to 180 degrees. And then, because it's here, it has rotated 180 degrees, we need to drive down. So we want it to drive forward again. Now it's going to drive forward until, right, our bumper is pressed. So once the bumper is pressed, we can tell it to, let's tell it to turn around. So it's facing the right way. So we want it to turn back to 0 degrees. Okay, let's test this out real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And there we go, right? It made it to A, it turned around, it's facing in the right direction. All right, so now let's move on to B. So I'm going to add in another comment. And I'm going to have to move these down because as I move my code down, as I build more code, those are going to move up with it, right? So we'll just leave it here for now. That's okay. All right, so moving on. Right, this time, what did we have for the last one? We said bumper sensors to letter A. This time, bumper and distance sensors to letter B. And the reason we have to use distance sensors is for one specific reason, and we're going to get to that here in just a moment. Okay, so right now we are at our new starting position. We're facing 0, right, our direction. So we need to think about, okay, so from getting from A to B, we're starting anew, right? Scratching everything else. We know that we got from start to A. We're starting from scratch now. Okay, from A to B, we need to drive forward. We need to have our robot drive forward until the bumper switch, the bumper sensor is hit. All right. Then we want it to turn left. All right. So we want to have it turn to heading 270 degrees. Once it turns to 270, it's going to drive forward again. Now, this is the tricky bit, because if we were to drive forward and then run into this wall, right? Let's do that actually. I'm going to keep driving forward until my bumper switch is pressed, right? And then I'll tell it to turn turn around, right? So we're going to say, 90 degrees. And then we're going to have it drive forward until the bumper switch is pressed, right? So from this point, I'm going to go ahead and start this over. And once we get from A going to B, you're going to see what the problem is going to be, right? It drives forward, turns left. Oh, now let's go back. And then we can continue this. The robot's going to get stuck. It's going to go back and forth, back and forth. So we need to actually tell it to stop in the center here, right? And that's where our distance sensor is actually going to come in handy, because even if we were to use the bumper switches, there's no physical way to tell the robot to just use bumper switches to get to stop here in the middle, right? So we know that a portion of this is wrong. Okay, so let's restart this. So from A, right, we want it to drive forward until the bumper switch is pressed, turn left, and then drive forward. So everything from here down is garbage. Okay, so this is the code. We know this is working here. The problem is we need it, as it's driving forward, we need it to stop in the center. So the one way that we could do that is we want it to wait until we have a distance that is less than a specific amount, right? And if we go to our distance sensing, we can say distance in millimeters, all right? And we know that every square block, if we were looking at grid, remember the grid, every one of these squares, all right, is 200 millimeters. So we can say, okay, move forward 200 millimeters, turn left 200 millimeters, go left 200 millimeters, go forward 200 millimeters, or whatever. So that would move us from block to block. So we only want to travel one block, right? Which is, once your robot's here, which is 200. Okay. Now, if we were to plug in 200 here and then tell it to turn, so we want it to turn so it's facing down, right? So that's 180. So it drives forward. It waits until it is 200 millimeters away from this wall. All right, the sensor is picking it up as it's driving forward. It's saying, okay, I'm watching this wall until I get to 200 millimeters. Boop, I'll stop, and then I'll turn to 180 degrees. Now I know already that there's going to be a problem with this, and let's watch what happens. Okay, so let's run the code from the beginning. It goes to A, it turns around, forward, turn left, drives forward. Oh man, look where it's facing, right? It's 200 millimeters away from the wall, right? But from the wall, 200 millimeters is actually in line with this wall, just where it's sitting right now. So we actually needed to be farther away than 200 millimeters, right? So we're actually going to increase this to half of that 200 distance, right? So, we're adding half of that 200 to itself. So it's actually 300 millimeters, right? So let's go ahead and run this again. So it gets to A, drives forward, hits the wall, turns left, drives forward 300, and then turns left, right? So now it's in line with where it needs to go. Okay, so from this point, we can then just continue on. So we have used our distance sensor. I'm going to go ahead and restart this. And let's run this one more time because I want it to be sitting where it needs to be. Okay, so from this point, we need it to continue to drive forward. So we're going to add in another one of those. Whoops. Come on. There we go. Drive forward until it runs into the wall. Then we want it to turn. And we want it to turn to drive, I guess, well, in your camera, it's this way, right? In that direction. So it's just 270 degrees. Drive forward again until it runs into the wall again. Let's move these down. All right, so trying to keep these where I can see them so I can make copies as I need. All right, so we have it driving forward, turning, drive forward, hitting, and then we need it to turn to 0 degrees this time because we want it to drive up. And then it's going to drive forward until it runs into the wall. And it'll be on top of that B at that point, right? Because it's driving forward, it hits the wall, and then we'll have it turn around. And in this case, we want it to face down. And now we should be at B. All right, so let's go ahead and restart this. Let's drive forward. Let's go ahead and get it going. So it reaches A. There's our distance sensing. And then it finishes with the bumper sensors the whole way until it gets to B. It turns around and it stops. All right, so this is where you come in. Okay, you can copy this code. Okay, so you can pause the video as you need, but I'm just going to run down through this right now. Nice and easy. There's our code from starting from going to letter A. There's our code for that. And then our code to letter B is right there. And then again, like I said, this is where you are picking up with letter C. So I'm going to add in a comment here. I would like you to break yours up as well as you are working on this. So we are going to say bumper and distance sensors to letter C. And then you'll finish that up by going to letter D. Okay, so you're going to have some kind of code in here in between the two, but don't forget to add in bumper. You'll probably use you're probably going to use the distance sensor. Well, will you? Yeah, you're going to be using the distance sensor to letter D. So bumper and distance sensors, letter D. All right. So yeah, so that's your assignment. You're going to be using this kind of exact style of code, just using the bumper switch and the distance sensor in order to get from B to C and from C to D. You can use the code that we went through together to kind of help you figure out what you need to do. Again, if you have any questions email me. You can hop on during my office hours. I'll be here to help you out. And I suppose that's it. All right, so there's your assignment for this week. And yeah, I guess I'll see you guys next time. And have a great day.